Cashin Holt slammed the coin pouch onto the scarred auction block. The thunk cut through the murmur of the crowd like a pistol shot. Men who'd been snickering over their beer and bad jokes turned to look at him. On the platform, the girl in the torn blue dress flinched but kept her chin high. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. Cashin didn't look at the girl first. He watched the auctioneer, the way the man's greedy eyes sharpened as he weighed the pouch in his palm. Now that, the auctioneer drawled, voice slick as lamp oil, sounds like a man serious about settling accounts. Don't it, folks? His grin cut across his whiskered face, all charm and no conscience. Mr. Holt, you understand what you're buying here? This ain't a year of service. This is a bride contract, legal and binding. Cashin's jaw tightened. I understand debt slavery when I see it, he said. And I don't like it in my town? A ripple ran through the crowd. The men gathered in the saloon's back room ranch hands, drifters. A few storekeepers who'd slipped away from their ledgers shifted on their feet. Someone coughed. Someone else muttered, Rich Holt thinks he can buy up everything, land, water, and wives now. Cashin ignored them. He had learned a long time ago that this town would talk no matter what he did. Let them. The Holt spread kept half of them in steady work and the other half in beef. They would still take his coin come spring roundup. He dragged his gaze to the girl. She stood on the rough plank platform they used for cattle lots and bankrupt stock, a slip of a thing in a dress that might once have been decent Sunday best. Now it was rain-stained and travel-crumpled, the hem ragged where it had been stepped on too many times. Her wrists were bound in front, with a length of rope more for show than restraint, a detail meant to remind the crowd what she was here as property. But she did not hold herself like property. Her shoulders were squared, her hands knotted into fists around the rope, her chin tilted in defiance. Her hair, a dark, tangled mass, had been pinned back in some kind of twist that had half fallen loose. A strand clung to her cheek, stuck to dried blood at the corner of her mouth. Cashin felt something cold uncoil in his chest. He had known he would hate tonight. He had known when Sheriff Lyle mentioned the judge signing off on a bride auction to settle Maxton Rowe's gambling debts. Cashin had walked away then, muttering that it was none of his business. But the words had lodged under his ribs and stayed there, pulsing like a bruise. Now, looking at the red seam on the girl's mouth, and the way her dress gaped at one shoulder as if some impatient hand had shoved her forward, he stopped wondering if he'd done the right thing. He wondered why he hadn't come sooner. You got no say in this, Holt, Maxton Rowe called from the corner, voice wobbly with drink and self-pity. The older man hunched on a whiskey crate, cheeks stubbled and eyes bloodshot, his once fine vest stained with sweat and spilled liquor. It's legal. Judge signed it. Debt's got to be paid. Cashin gave him a look that made lesser men step back from a bar. Maxton flinched, but didn't quite shut up. Debt's paid now, Cashin said. Every cent you owe the saloon, the store, the bank, and whatever you lost at cards last week. I told you last month, I'd see you clear if you sold off them 3 acres you never use. You called me a vulture. Now I'm paying anyway. He turned back to the auctioneer. You put in every note and gambling marker when you totaled that figure, Garvey? Course I did, Garvey lied, too quickly. His fingers tightened around the pouch. She goes to the highest bidder. You're the first one to throw real money. We had some. His gaze slid over the crowd, over the faces of men who'd shouted half-serious offers earlier, more for amusement than intent, playful numbers. But this here beats 'em all. Cashin knew it had. He'd made sure. The amount he'd slammed down could have bought 10 good horses or hired 3 more hands for a season. It was a stupid sum to spend on a stranger. His father would have said so. Old Amos Holt had drilled it into his boys young. Never buy trouble you do'n't have to own. Cashin had built the Holt spread out of that hard lesson-adding fields and water rights, buying out failing neighbors, making the Holt brand mean steady wages and full bellies. Trouble came anyway, as fire and fever and loss, but never because he'd gone looking for it. Yet here he was, reaching into his pockets for the heaviest trouble he could imagine. A wife he hadn't chosen, bought out of a saloon. Except, no, he corrected himself. Bought out of bondage. That was different. It had to be. Garvey cleared his throat. Well then, he announced, lifting his free hand to the crowd. Looks like Miss Rowe here won't be left on the shelf after all. Sold to Mr. Cashin Holt of the Double Bar H. He slammed his palm on the block to punctuate the words. The girl flinched again at the sound, but she didn't lower her chin. Cashin stepped closer. The crowd parted for him like tall grass for a rider, all the whispered jokes and muttered commentary retreating to the edges of his hearing. His boots thudded on the warped floorboards as he mounted the single step up to the platform. Garvey slid between him and the girl with a merchant's eagerness. "Now we'll draw up papers, Mr. Holt," he said. "Bride contract, 3 years minimum. Rights of marriage," Cashin cut in. Garvey blinked. "Beg your pardon?" "You said it's a bride contract." Judge signed it. "You put my name there. It turns legal marriage, not indenture dressed up pretty." Cashin's voice stayed even, but the thread running under it was steel. "No man in this room will say Cashin Holt bought a bound girl home like a horse." Someone in the back snorted. "We're already saying it," a voice called. Laughter hissed through the smoke. Cashin didn't turn. "Let them." He kept his eyes on Garvey. "You want my coin. You draw it straight. I've got a Bible at home that'll do the rest." He hadn't planned to say that. The word married had leapt ahead of his sense, tasting foreign and heavy on his tongue. His chest tightened in the space where another word used to live. Tess, his mind supplied, cruel and unbidden. His little sister's face flickered at the edge of his memory, all sharp cheekbones and wild dark hair, smoke-streaked the last time he saw it. Cashin swallowed hard. On the platform, the girl shifted, the rope biting into her reddened wrists. The movement tugged his attention back to her. He finally let himself look at her face. The world narrowed to a pinhole. Her eyes were wide and watchful, a deep brown that was almost black, ringed by lashes clumped with the salt of dried tears. Her cheekbones were sharp, more from hunger than from reading. The bruise at the corner of her mouth had purpled, the skin split in a small V where someone's ring had caught. A faint, pale scar cut from her eyebrow down toward her temple, disappearing into the hair at her ear. It wasn't those details that stopped him cold. It was the shape of her mouth when she said it, stubborn against fear. The slight tilt of her nose. The way her chin notched, as if carved by the same hand that had carved another face he had once known better than his own. For a breathless second, he was no longer standing in a smoky saloon in Dry Creek. He was 14 again, kneeling in the ash of his family's burned-out house, cradling a girl with these same bones, this same wild hair, this same stubborn mouth slack and covered in soot. "Tess," he whispered, before he could stop himself. The girl on the platform went very still. Her gaze sharpened from watchful to piercing. "That's not my name," she said, voice low but clear. Cashin forced air back into his lungs. The sounds of the room flooded in the creak of chairs, the clink of bottles, the tinny tunes from the piano in the next room, the smell of stale beer and cigar smoke and unwashed bodies pressed against him. Of course it wasn't Tess. His sister was 10 years in the ground, or what was left of her was scattered when the roof caved in over the children's room. He dug with his bare hands until Lyle dragged him away. There'd been no body to bury. He knew that. He had lived with that, but the resemblance was enough to make his hands shake. He curled them into fists before anyone could see. "What is your name?" he asked the girl, his voice roughened by more than smoke. She held his gaze without flinching. That, more than anything, told him she understood exactly what had just crossed his face. Tamsin Rowe, she said. Maxton Rowe's daughter. At the mention of her father, Maxton shifted on his crate, shoulders slumping deeper. He didn't speak. Cashin's stomach nodded. Of course. He'd known Maxton had a girl somewhere, hoarding with kin after his wife died. He'd just never cared enough to ask what became of her. Now he was looking at the answer. Rope burned, bruised, and up for sale. Miss Rowe, he said slowly, I'll see your bonds cut as soon as we leave this room. You understand? She glanced at the rope, then back at him. There was no gratitude in her eyes. Only a wary, feral kind of measuring. And if I don't want to leave with you? She asked. Garvey tittered, glancing between them like a man watching a card game turn interesting. Oh, now, girl, the papers are near as good as signed, he said. You go where your husband says you go? That's the law. He tipped his head toward Cashin. And you just landed yourself a mighty fine one. Holt here owns more land than anyone in 3 counties. You'll sleep with a roof and eat meat every day. That's more than most of them could promise. He jerked his thumb at the room. Murmurs and grudging nods greeted the words. Men respected Cashin enough to admit the truth of that. Cashin wanted to reach out and throttle Garvey for the way he'd said sleep, slick, and suggestive. Instead, he breathed through his teeth. She eat meat every day because she be paid in more than scraps, he said. And she have her own room, her own wages from the ranch books if she wants them. You put that in writing with the rest. Garvey frowned. That's unusual terms for a wife. I'm an unusual man, Cashin said. Write it. Tamsin's gaze flickered, just for a heartbeat. And in that flicker, he saw something like surprise sidle in alongside the suspicion. Garvey shifted his weight, greed and reluctance wrestling across his face. The money in his hand won. Fine, he muttered. Fine. We'll draw it that way. Lyle, you hear? Sheriff Lyle, standing near the back wall with one shoulder propped against the saloon's peeling plaster, lifted his chin. His badge glinted dully in the lamplight. Heard, he said. I'll witness. Then it's done. Garvey turned to the crowd, eager again, now that the legalities were settled. Gentlemen, show Mr. Holt and his bride your congratulations, and then kindly clear on out. I've got dealing to do. The room broke into scattered applause and laughter that felt more mocking than merry. Men began to drift toward the doors, slapping Cashin on the back as they passed, some offering ribald advice, others heartfelt congratulations. Cashin took neither. He stepped past Garvey until he stood directly in front of Tamsin. Up close, the resemblance to Tess wasn't as sharp. Tamsin was older than Tess had been, taller, her shoulders broader, her hands roughened by work. The scar near her temple was new, and the bruises and split lip were testimony to different dangers. But the echo was there, enough to make his heart misstep. I'm going to untie you, he said quietly. She stared at him a beat too long, like a feral cat deciding whether to bolt or bite the hand offering scraps. Then she lifted her bound wrists without a word. His fingers brushed her skin as he worked the knot loose. Her pulse jumped under his touch, swift and tight. Whether from fear or anger, he couldn't tell. The rope dropped to the floor. She rubbed her wrists, the skin reddened and abrased, but not broken. You didn't answer me, she said, voice low enough that Garvey and the nearest men wouldn't hear over the clatter of chairs. About what? If I don't want to leave with you, what then? Cashin met her gaze. Then you still walk out of here with coin and choice, he said. The debt is paid. I'll see that in writing. The rest we'll talk about. Her jaw flexed. Men like you, she said, always think you decide what counts as choice. Cashin took the words like a blow he knew he deserved, whether from this girl or the ghosts that walked his own halls at night. Maybe, he said. But tonight, The only way I see to stop them from selling you to the highest bidder is to be the highest bidder myself. I can't change how you got on that platform. I can change what happens after." Her eyes flickered again. Fear and fury, and some stubborn thread of hope twisted together there, in a mix that tugged at something deep in his chest. She looked past him, to where Maxton Rowe still slumped in the corner. "And him?" she asked, voice gone flat. "What happens to him?" Cashin turned his head. Maxton had sunk lower, his head lolling, his hand slack over an empty glass. The man who'd once been a decent card dealer and doting father had shriveled into a husk blasted by bad luck and worse choices. Cashin thought of all the times friends had told him to throw Maxton off the Holt property when he'd come begging for work or drink money. He'd always tossed him some odd job instead. It hadn't mattered. "He signs the papers and walks out of here with his skin intact," Cashin said. "I'll make sure his slate's clean in town. After that, where he ends up is on him." Tamsen's mouth pressed thin. "You should let them take him instead," she murmured. "Might fetch more." Cashin studied her. There was no mistaking the angle of her shoulders now, the way they had been holding weight too heavy for too long. The bitterness in her words wasn't cruelty. It was the scaffold she'd built to keep from collapsing. "You want that?" he asked quietly. Her nostrils flared. "Want's got nothing to do with it." No, it didn't. Not for people like her. Not for the child he'd been, kneeling in ash. Cashin straightened. "Get off the platform," he said, gentler than his words. "We'll sign what's needed, and then we'll see about a proper meal." Her eyes narrowed at the last word. "When did you eat last?" he asked. She hesitated. "Yesterday," she said finally. "Morning. We traded what was left of my mother as brooch for bread and cheese before the stage left." Cashin looked at the hollows under her eyes, the way her dress hung looser than it ought. He didn't believe there'd been much bread or cheese. "Come on," he said. "There's stew at the boarding house." "It's not fine, but it's hot." "If this is the part where you start being kind, so I'll be grateful later," she began. "No," Cashin said firmly. "This is the part where I keep you from collapsing on the way to the ranch, because some fool man thought he could auction off a starving girl like a Mare." Something flickered again in her gaze at the word girl. She drew herself up, shoulders back, chin higher. "I'm not a girl," she said. "I'm 19. Her mouth curled in a sardonic half-smile that helped erase the ghost of Tess. "Old maid by town talk. Already?" Cashin's lips twitched despite himself. "And forgive me," he said. "I have no practice buying brides of any age." Her eyes flashed. For the first time, something like real humor edged the darkness there. "Good," she muttered. "I'd hate to think you're in the habit." They stepped down from the platform together. The crowd had thinned while they'd talked. Only a few lingered men who owed Cashin wages or grudges and weren't sure which weighed more. Sheriff Lyle pushed off the wall and crossed the room, his boots whispering over sawdust and spilled whiskey. "Papers are ready over at the table," he said, nodding toward a back corner where the clerk waited with pen and ink. "Judge signed the form earlier. We just fill in names and particulars." His gaze slid to Tamsen, lingering a moment on the bruise at her mouth. His jaw tightened. "You understand what's being put to paper, miss?" "I understand that my father gambled away more than he owned," Tamsen said, "and that I'm the only thing left to trade." Her eyes cut to Cashin. "What I do understand is why a man with this much money would tie himself to someone no one else wanted." Lyle's brows rose. "You got more sand than most men I arrest," he said. "For what it's worth, miss, Holt here's the least ugly bargain you could have drawn." Cashin snorted softly. "Careful, Lyle. Folks will start saying you're my friend." "They say worse anyway," Lyle replied. "Come sign, both of you. If we're doing this, we do it clean. I'm not leaving room for Garvey to twist words later." They moved to the table. Tamsin walked with a slight hitch in her step, as if one ankle had been turned and never properly rested. Cashin filed that away with the bruises and rope burns and hunger. A list of injuries he could see. The ones he couldn't would take longer to learn. The clerk's hands shook as he slid the paper forward. The words bride contract marched across the top, neat and black and binding. Cashin skimmed the legal language. It was as ugly as he'd expected phrases about ownership and obedience and rights that belonged more to livestock bills of sale than human agreements. Cross that, he said, tapping a finger under a line. And that, replace it with what I told you. Separate room, wages, her name on any bank account we open. The clerk gaped. Sir, I don't know if. You do now, Cashin said quietly. Lyle leaned over the clerk's shoulder. He's not asking, the sheriff said. Write it. Ink scratched. Words changed. The ugly lines softened into something still lopsided, but less cruel. Cashin picked up the pen. He stared at the blank line, waiting for his signature longer than the situation warranted. The last time he'd written his name under anything that had the word marriage on it, he had done it in a church smelling of beeswax and lally. Tess laughing behind him, his bride's hand trembling in his. That signature had cost him more than any land deal ever had. He signed anyway. Cashin Holt. The ink soaked into the fibers of the page, binding him to a stranger, bound to him by rope and circumstance. He turned the pen and held it out to Tamsin. You can make your mark, he said. Or sign, if you know how. A flash of something like offense lit her eyes. She took the pen. Her hand didn't tremble. Tamsin Rowe, she wrote in small, precise letters. She dotted the I with a firm jab, as if making sure the paper understood she meant every stroke. Lyle signed next. Then the clerk. Then, finally, Maxton Rowe shuffled over, eyes bleary, and scrawled a messy X where they pointed. You're a fool, Maxton, Lyle muttered under his breath. Should have taken Holt's offer months ago instead of selling your girl. Maxton's eyes slid to his daughter. Shame flared and died there, smothered by the drink. She eat good, he mumbled. Better than with me. Tamsin's expression didn't change. It was too still. Cashin wanted to drag Maxton outside and shake him until whatever father remained behind those bloodshot eyes woke up. He didn't. The law had been satisfied. The debt was settled. What remained was Tamsin. He turned to her. Come on, he said quietly. Boarding house first, then the ranch. You mean your house, she said. Your bed. He stiffened. I mean my land, he answered. My people. My obligations. The rest we'll talk when you've eaten and slept. I'm not in the habit of taking what isn't freely given. Her gaze searched his face, as if looking for cracks in the words. She didn't seem to find any she recognized. Her shoulders dropped a fraction. Fine, she said. Lead the way, Mr. Holt. Dry Creek's main street lay thick with churned dust and manure, the usual evening haze of smoke and noise spilling out of the saloon and the boarding house. Lamps glowed behind shop windows, throwing rectangles of yellow onto porches. The sky overhead had gone from gold to bruised purple, pressing low over the line of low, crooked buildings and the distant stretch of prairie. Cashin didn't look at the sky. He rarely did anymore. Too many storms had come out of clear blue. He guided Tamsin along the boardwalk, matching his stride to hers, when he realized how much she had to stretch to meet his pace. Every step she took seemed measured, as if she expected the ground to give way. You said there's stew, she said after a quiet block. Her voice was neutral, words carefully trimmed of anything that might sound like need. Mrs. Porter keeps a pot on most nights, Cashin said. She likes to gossip more than she likes to cook, but she doesn't burn water. You'll manage. You speak of her like she's a neighbor. Tamsin's eyes flicked to the side, taking in the town with that same hall-guarded watchfulness. "But you're richer than all of them put together." "That's what they say," Cashin said. "What I am is a man who pays Mrs. Porter for stew when I'm in town, and doesn't ask questions he doesn't need answered. One of those questions is how she manages to have beef for the pot when her husband hasn't worked honest wages in months." He opened the boarding-house door and let Tamsin pass before him. Warmth and the smell of cooking wrapped around them. The dining room was half full. The stage driver, 2 traveling salesmen, a miner or 2. Heads turned as Cashin stepped inside. Mrs. Porter bustled out from the kitchen, apron flapping, cheeks flushed. "Evenin', Mr. Holt," she said, voice bright as a bell. Then she saw Tamsin, and her brows dove down. "Now who's this little bird you've brought to my table?" "My wife," Cashin said, letting the word settle heavy and undeniable in the room. Spoons paused in midair. Eyes widened. A murmur ran around the tables. Mrs. Porter's hand flew to her mouth. Then she flapped the same hand at everyone else. "Eat your supper and mind your manners," she scolded. "Man can't bring his wife to town without you staring like you never saw a dress before. Sit, sit." She grabbed 2 bowls from a nearby stack and jerked her head toward an empty table near the window. Cashin guided Tamsin there. She moved stiffly, shoulders tight, every pair of eyes in the room scraping over her bruises and too thin frame. He wanted to wrap his coat around her to shield her from it. He did not. He knew what pity felt like to someone standing in rags. Heavy, like another layer of chains. They sat. Mrs. Porter slapped a bowl in front of each of them and funked down a heel of bread between. "Beef and potatoes," she said. "Not as tough as my husband's hide, but close. Eat while it's hot." Her gaze lingered on Tamsin a heartbeat longer, softening around the edges. "There's more if you want it, miss. No charge tonight." She darted a quick glance at Cashin. "We'll mark it on the Holt account." Cashin nodded. "Thank you." Tamsin stared at the bowl. Steam rose in lazy curls, carrying the smell of meat and onion and pepper. Her throat worked. "Go on," Cashin said quietly. "It's not going to bite." "I'm not a child," she said, but her voice shook. "I didn't say you were," he replied. She picked up her spoon. The first mouthful seemed to hit her like a blow. Her eyes closed, lashes dampening as she chewed. She swallowed with difficulty, as if her body wasn't sure whether to accept the sudden abundance. Cashin looked away, giving her the dignity of not being watched while she remembered what feeling full felt like. He ate his own stew more slowly than usual, letting the rhythm of the spoon steady him. It had been a long time since he sat across a table from someone and felt responsible for whether they ate tomorrow. Across from him, the scrape of Tamsin's spoon grew faster. She finished her bowl, then paused, eyes flicking to the bread. "Take it," he said. "You haven't. I ate on the range earlier." "Take it." She hesitated, and tore the heel in 2 and slid half across to him. "Share," she said. "You paid for me, not for my pride. That comes free." His mouth tugged at one corner. "So I see." She ate the bread in small, efficient bites, as if rationing it even now. Mrs. Porter reappeared to refill their bowls without asking. Tamsin's eyes widened almost comically. "There's enough," Mrs. Porter said, softer this time. "And if there wasn't, Mr. Holt's pockets go deep. You eat. A woman can't face whatever fool you've tied yourself to on an empty stomach." She winked at Cashin to soften the sting. "Yes, ma'am," Tamsin murmured. They ate in silence after that, the noise of the room swelling again around them. Men went back to their conversations, their card games, their plans. Cashin's mind stayed with the girl across from him. His wife, he corrected himself, though the word still felt like a coat that didn't fit. Too tight across the shoulders, too stiff at the seams. When Tamsin finally pushed her second empty bowl away, there was a hint of color in her cheeks that hadn't been there earlier. It made her look less like a ghost. "Thank you," she said finally, not looking up. "For the food." "You're welcome," Cashin said simply. "Don't read too much into it," she added, as if the words hurt coming out. "You saved yourself trouble as much as you saved me." "A starved mule's no good in the field," Cashin huffed. "You're not a mule," he said. "And I didn't buy you for the fields." Her eyes snapped up. "What did you buy me for, then?" The question hung between them like a noose. He could have said the first thing that came to any man's mind in a situation like this: warmth in his bed, children, at his table, a woman to fill the empty rooms of the big house on the Holt spread. Those might come someday, or they might not. What he had bought her for, if he dared admit it even to himself, was this: the way her eyes had flashed in defiance when she stood on that platform, the way she had spoken of selling her father instead, the way she had looked like the dead and the living all at once. "To have a say in her own story," he said after a moment. "At least more than you were going to get tonight." She stared at him as if trying to decide whether he was mocking her. "Men like you," she said slowly, "don't usually care about stories. Only about land and cattle and their own names." Her gaze slid to the calluses on his hands, the wear on his coat, the lines carved at the corners of his eyes. "You don't look like a man who'd spend that much money just to feel good about himself." "I'm not," he said. "Then why?" she pressed. "Because you looked like someone I failed," he thought. "Because maybe if I keep you from earning, it'll count for something." He didn't say that. "Maybe I got tired of watching this town chew up people it should have protected," he answered instead. "Maybe I figured if I can fix one thing I helped break, I should." Her eyes narrowed. "How did you help break it?" He let out a slow breath. "By not stepping in sooner," he said. "By letting men like Garvey and Maxton and the judge call this normal." She held his gaze a long moment. Then she looked away. "You can't fix what they did," she murmured. "Not with papers and stew." "No," he agreed. "But it's a place to start." She didn't answer. When they left the boarding house, the street had thinned. The saloon still spilled light and noise, but the rest of the town had settled into its nighttime creaks and sighs. Cashin led Tamsin toward the livery, where his bay gelding waited and another horse he'd borrowed stood ready, saddled and restless. "You ride?" he asked. She lifted her chin. "Of course. My mother put me on a horse before I could walk." He believed her. The way she moved told him she knew how to adjust to whatever saddle she was thrown into. He helped her mount anyway. Her ankle clearly pained her when she swung up, as she bit back a wince rather than acknowledge it. He swung up on his gelding, took the second horse's reins, and they set off down the dark road out of town. The prairie at night was a different country than the one under the sun. The land flattened into a dark sea that swallowed sound and distance. Stars spilled overhead in a riot of cold fire. Cashin's world narrowed to the sound of hooves, the creak of leather, and the small figure riding just behind his right shoulder. For the first mile, Tamsin said nothing. He could feel her watching him, though, the weight of her gaze on his back. "You keep glancing like that, you'll ride into a ditch," he said at last without turning. "What makes you think I'm looking at you?" She shot back. "Because there's nothing else on this road worth that much suspicion." A pause. Then, grudging, "Fair enough." He smiled into the dark. "How far is it?" she asked after a while. "The ranch?" He said, 9 miles if we cut across the creek bed. 10 if we take the road. And which are we taking?" "The road," he said. "Your ankle doesn't need the creek bed's tricks." She bristled. "I told you I can ride, yes," he said. "You don't have to prove it all in one night." Silence again, prickly this time. "Tell me about it," she said suddenly. "About what?" "The ranch, your land. If I'm being dragged there against my better judgment, I'd like to know what prison looks like." He huffed a laugh. "It's hardly a prison," he said. Double Bar H sits in a wide valley with good grass and a river that doesn't dry up even in August. House is big enough for 10 and quiet enough for a grave most nights. Barns are solid. Corrals are stout. Hands are rough but decent. Sounds like a dream, she said dryly. For some men it is, he admitted. For me, it's work that never ends. Then why keep it? Sell it. Go live in a town where no one looks at you like they do. Her words hit closer than she knew. This land is Holt land, he said softly. My father nearly broke himself carving it out. My brother died on it. My sister? The word snagged. She never got to leave it. That's a lot of ghosts, Tamsin said. I know, he replied. You sound like you think you owe them. I do. What about what you owe yourself? He gave a humorless smile. What I owe myself is to make sure their deaths weren't wasted. She was quiet a moment. My mother used to say the dead don't need us to justify them, she said finally. They're past needing anything. We just tell ourselves they do so we don't have to admit we want things for ourselves. Her voice softened on the word mother. Cashin heard the ache there. She sounds like she was a sharp woman, he said. She was, Tamsin said, right up until the fever took her and the man she married started trying to drink her memory away. Her tone flattened again. That's when the card tables took him instead. I'm sorry, Cashin said. Don't be, she answered. You weren't there. No, he thought. But I know what it's like to not be there when you should have been. They rode on. The road dipped toward the creek, the air cooling as it neared water. Crickets sang. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote yipped. Why did you call me Tess? Tamsin asked suddenly. Cashin's hands tightened on the reins. You heard that. Not deaf, she said. You looked at me like you'd seen a ghost. I've been called a lot of things. Ghost ain't one of them. He hesitated. The easier lie that he'd misspoken, that he'd been thinking of something else, pressed at his tongue. He spat it aside. My sister, he said. She died in a fire when I was a boy. You favored her for a moment, up on that platform. It caught me off guard. The horse's hooves thumped on packed earth. Tamsin digested that. I'm sorry, she said after a long moment. About your sister. He nodded, though she couldn't see it. It was a long time ago. That doesn't mean it doesn't hurt, she said. No, he agreed. It doesn't? They were both quiet after that, each riding with ghosts that didn't belong to the other. The first faint outline of the Double Bar H as main gate rose out of the dark an hour later, the crossbar of the entryway silhouetted against the starry sky. Beyond it, Cashin could see the low shapes of the barns and the larger, squarer shadow of the house. His chest tightened. He had never before ridden home with someone beside him who wasn't one of his hands. He wondered what the ranch would look like through Tamsin's eyes. As they passed under the gate, a lantern swung up ahead. A figure stepped out from the shadows at the bunkhouse porch, the light catching on a mop of unruly hair and an easy grin. That you, boss? Came a familiar drawl. Evenin', Jonah, Cashin called back. Jonah Pike, his foreman and oldest friend, sauntered toward them, boots thudding in the packed dirt. The lantern revealed a face sun-browned and lined from squinting into too many dawns. Thought you'd be stuck at Garvey's all night, Jonah said. Then his gaze slid to Tamsin. His stride hitched. Well now, either I've taken a blow to the head, or you've brought home a miracle. Neither, Cashin said. This is Tamsin Rowe, my wife. Jonah's eyebrows shot up so high they nearly disappeared under his hair. Your what? Wife, Cashin repeated, voice even. Jonah whistled low. Hell, Holt, I leave you alone in town for one evening, and you go and do something interesting. He tipped his hat to Tamsin, his usual easy charm tempered with curiosity. Ma'am, Jonah Pike, I run the place when he's off mackin'. Questionable decisions. Tamsin's mouth twitched, despite the fatigue etching her features. "Seems like you'll be busy," she said. Jonah barked a laugh. "I like her," he told Cashin. "You sure she married you of her own free will?" "Ask me that again tomorrow," Cashin said dryly. "Tonight we need two things, a room aired and hot water." "We got both," Jonah said. "Livia's been fussing at the empty rooms for months. She'll be glad to have someone to spoil." He peered closer at Tamsin, his grin fading when he spotted the bruise on her mouth. His jaw hardened. "She'll be mad as a wet hen when she sees that, though." "Let her," Cashin said. "Maybe it'll keep her from fussing about the dust." "Nothing keeps Livia from fussing about dust," Jonah said. "Go on. I'll tell the boys to keep their tongues in their heads and their hands to themselves." "Do that," Cashin said. He dismounted and came around to help Tamsin down. She tried to swing her leg over on her own and stumbled when her ankle buckled. His hands shot out, catching her by the waist. For a heartbeat, her full weight rested against him. She was lighter than she should have been, all bones and stubborn sinew. He felt the sharp rise of her ribs under his fingers, the hitch in her breath as the movement tugged at bruised muscles. "Easy," he murmured. She stiffened. "I can stand," she said. "I know," he replied. "Let me help you until you can do it without gritting your teeth." She glared up at him. Then, slowly, she let him ease her onto her feet. Her hand remained on his arm a heartbeat longer than needed. Then she pulled away. The house loomed ahead, dark except for a few lamps glowing behind the front windows. Cashin led the way up the steps, Tamsin's tread soft behind him. He hesitated for the first time at the threshold. The door was just wood and iron, worn smooth by years of hands. But crossing it tonight felt like stepping over a line he couldn't uncross. He opened it. Warmth and the faint smell of yeast and soap wrapped around them. The entry hall was wide, with hooks on the wall for coats and a long bench. A staircase rose to the left. To the right, a doorway opened into the parlor, where a fire burned low in the grate. "Mr. Holt?" came a woman's voice from the back of the house. Cashin smiled faintly. "Evenin', Livia," he called. "Got company." Livia appeared in the doorway to the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. She was a sturdy woman in her 50s, hair pulled back in a neat knot, eyes sharp as a hawk. She took in Cashin's dust, Tamsin's dress, the bruise on her mouth, and the whole of the situation in one swift, practiced survey. Her eyes widened. "Well," she said, "either I've died in my sleep and gone where the Lord finally answered my prayers, or you've brought a lady into this museum." "Don't start with the sermons," Cashin said. "This is Tamsin, my wife." Livia's dishcloth dropped to the floor. "You're—" She broke off, clapped a hand to her chest, then pivoted toward Tamsin with startling speed. "You poor thing. You must be exhausted. Look at you. You've barely got meat on your bones. Come in, child." She clucked like a mother hen, bustling forward. "I'm not a child," Tamsin protested weakly, as Livia began inspecting her like a new foal. "No, we a woman who looks like she has had men making decisions for her that they had no business making," Livia said briskly. "Which makes you my business now. Cashin Holt, you might be the smartest fool I ever met. Bringing her home this way, without so much as a letter." She shook her head, but her eyes were soft when she turned back to Tamsin. "We'll get you washed, and into something that doesn't look like it lost a fight with a barn door." "She's tired," Cashin said gently. "She can wash in the morning." "Nonsense," Livia said. "No one sleeps in my house smelling of Garvey's whiskey." "Come on, miss." Tamsin's gaze flicked between Cashin and Livia, as if unsure which whirlwind to trust. "I can wash myself," she said firmly. "I don't need anyone hovering over me." Livia's mouth curved. "Spoken like someone who's had too many people hovering over her the wrong way," she said. "Good. You'll fit in fine. I'll show you the room. Cashin, you stay where you are. She doesn't need you glaring over her shoulder while I dig out linens." Cashin bristled. I'm not. Glaring is your natural state, Livia said. Shoo, go see to the stock or stare at your ledgers. Leave the lady to me for an hour. Tamsin's lips twitched. Cashin caught the flicker of humor there and felt some tight knot in his chest loosen. If you need anything, he said to Tamsin, ignoring Livia's eye roll, my room's down the hall from yours. Third door on the left. I doubt I'll be knocking, Tamsin said. He inclined his head. That is your choice. She studied him a moment, as if memorizing the way his face looked in his own house. Then she nodded once and turned to follow Livia up the stairs. He watched them go until their footsteps faded. Only then did he let the weight of the day sag onto his shoulders. The kitchen was quiet when he finally wandered in half an hour later, having checked the barns and listened to Jonah's rapid-fire questions until his head throbbed. The hands had settled, the horses were watered, and the sky outside the windows was black velvet pricked with a million indifferent stars. Cashin poured himself a cup of coffee from the pot on the stove, the bitter smell grounding. He leaned against the counter and stared at the back door. He had not meant, when he'd ridden into town that afternoon, to upend his life. He'd meant to buy lumber, check on the banknote for the new windmill, and speak to Lyle about the rustlers that had been cutting Holt calves from the herd. He'd meant to be back before dark. Instead, he had a wife upstairs and a dozen questions pressing against his ribs. He heard it then, the faint creak of floorboards overhead, the soft murmur of women's voices, the squeak of the pump as Livia filled the bath in the small washroom off the spare bedroom. A door closing. Silence. He pictured Tamsin standing in that room, hands hovering uncertainly over the basin, shoulders bared of the torn blue dress. He forced the image away. It felt too much like taking something he hadn't earned. He didn't intend to be the kind of man she clearly expected. The back door creaked. Cashin turned, expecting Jonah. Instead, Sheriff Lyle stepped into the kitchen, hat in hand. Cashin straightened. You're late for supper, he said. Livia'll have your hide. I'll risk it, Lyle said. His face was more serious than usual, the lines around his eyes deeper. Needed a word with you, Cass. Cashin's shoulders tightened. If it's about Garvey. It ain't, Lyle said. Though I wish it were that simple. He stepped further into the room and set a folded piece of paper on the table. Cashin's gut clenched. What is it? Wire came in from Red Rock while you were signing papers, Lyle said. I rode out soon's I could saddle. Figured you needed to see it before morning. He tapped the paper. Take a look. Cashin picked it up and unfolded it. The telegram was brief, printed in spare, clipped words. Sikh woman Tamsin Row Wee. Stop wanted for questioning in Red Rock holdup stop possible accomplice to outlaw, known as Finch stop apprehend, if seen stop. Cashin read it twice, each word settling like a stone. He looked up slowly. You knew when we signed? No, Lyle said. It came in after. I was halfway to the livery when the station boy flagged me down. I read it and came straight here. Questioning, Cashin said, the word gritty. Not convicted. Not yet, Lyle agreed. But Red Rock's marshal ain't the type to send wires for no reason. Cashin's mind raced. Finch, he said. I've heard that name. Outlaw been stirring up trouble all along the rail line, Lyle said. Bank wagons hit, payroll's gone. 2 guards dead. Fast with a gun and faster with an exit. No one's seen his face clear, but he's got a reputation. And they think Tamsin rode with him, Cashin said. Or knows him, Lyle said. Maybe ran with his crew. Maybe got caught in the wrong place. He held Cashin's gaze. I don't know, Cass. I'm not saying the girl you brought home is guilty. I'm saying the law's looking for her. Cashin's hand tightened around the telegram until the paper crinkled. He thought of the scar by her temple, the way she'd watched every door in that saloon. The way she'd spoken about men making choices for her. "You gonna arrest her?" he asked. Lyle shifted his weight. "If I was a by-the-book lawman with no brain, I'd say yes," he said. "Drag her out of that bed and slam irons on her wrists. Let Red Rock sort it out." "But you're not," Cashin said. "No," Lyle said. "I'm a lawman with eyes. I saw the way Garvey paraded her tonight. Saw how Maxton smelled of fear and guilt. I don't know what mess she's in, but I doubt she masterminded a hold-up that slick." "Then why send the wire?" Cashin demanded. "Because if she is tied to Finch, he might come looking. Better I know that ahead of time," Lyle said. "And because if Red Rock sends someone ridden this way, and they find her in your house without me knowing, it'll look a hell of a lot worse for both of you." A slow, cold anger unfurled in Cashin's chest. "So what do you expect me to do? March her into town at first light and hand her over?" Lyle met his gaze. "I expect you to decide whether the woman you just married is worth the trouble she's bringing," he said quietly. "And I expect you to tell her the truth before someone else does." Cashin looked down at the telegram again. Tamsin Row. Questioning. Finch. The girl upstairs had climbed onto that platform with a bruise on her mouth, rope around her wrists, and hunger hollowing her eyes. She had stood there like a soldier refused retreat. He did not know if she'd ridden with an outlaw. He did know what it looked like when a town decided someone was guilty before they spoke. He folded the telegram once, then again, each crease sharp. "I'm not throwing her to wolves on the word of a wire," he said. Lyle's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "Didn't think you would," he said. "But you needed to see it." "Thank you," Cashin said. "I'll give you until tomorrow," Lyle said. "After that, if Red Rock sends a man, I can't pretend I don't know she's here." "Understood," Cashin said. Lyle nodded. "Get some sleep," he said. "You'll need your wits tomorrow." He tapped his hat back onto his head and let himself out the back door. The kitchen felt colder after he left. Cashin stood alone, the folded telegram biting into his palm, listening to the small sounds of the house settling for the creak of a board overhead, the sigh of wind against the eaves, the whisper of a woman's footsteps in a hallway that had forgotten the sound. He thought of the vow he'd made over fresh graves, that he would keep what was his safe, that he'd never again fail to step between the people under his roof and whatever fire came for them. Tamsin was under his roof now. Trouble was under it with her. He closed his hand around the telegram until the edges dug into his skin, a small pane to anchor the larger one building inside. Tomorrow, he'd have to lay that scrap of paper between them and see what cracked. Tonight, he let himself picture the way she'd looked when she tasted stew, eyes closing as if she couldn't quite believe in warmth. He knew what it was to doubt warmth. The house settled. Somewhere above, a floorboard creaked a light step, crossing from one side of the room to the other. Cashin exhaled slowly. He unfolded his fingers and stared down at the words one last time. Then he set the telegram on the table, its black letters stark against the warm wood, and turned down the lamp, leaving the kitchen in shadow. Outside, a coyote yipped again, closer this time. Inside, under his roof, the outlaw's name sat between him and the woman he'd just claimed as his. The sketch that would come with the next rider from Red Rock, Cashin knew, would show more than the crude letters on that page. He could already see it in his mind. Tamsin's face rendered in harsh lines of ink, her eyes turned into something cold and dangerous. Cashin stared into the dark where the telegram lay and understood that when that sketch arrived, he'd have to choose which version of her to believe. This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now, back to the story. Cashin laid the telegram between the plates and watched Tamsin stop breathing. She'd been tracing a circle in a smear of jam with one finger, pretending to listen to Livia fuss about chickens and busted fence posts. The kitchen smelled like coffee and fresh biscuits. It should have been an ordinary morning. Instead, The strip of paper on the table looked like a thin white blade. "What is that?" she asked. Her voice was too calm. Cashin could hear the strain. Under it the same way, a man heard a creak before it flooded. "Wire from Red Rock," he said. "Came in after we left town. Lyle brought it out last night." He nudged the telegram closer. "It's about you." Her jaw tightened. She didn't touch it. "Efficient," she said. "You buy me with one hand and invite the law with the other." He took that blow. He deserved some part of it. "If Lyle meant to arrest you, he'd have ridden in with irons," Cashin said quietly. "He brought this so we had warning. I'm not putting you on a horse blind. Read it." Something in the last 3 words must have slipped past the shell she wore. Tamsin snatched up the telegram and snapped it open. Cashin watched the change in her face as her eyes moved down the lines. He saw the exact moment she hit the miscut version of her name, and the moment she saw Finch. Her fingers crushed the paper. "No," she whispered. "You know him," Cashin said. Her head jerked up. "Everyone knows of him," she shot back. "He's just a story drunk men tell to feel brave." But her hand shook around the telegram. "Red Rock doesn't send wires for stories," he said. "They think Finch and Tamsin Row we ride together. They want you for questioning. Maybe more than questioning." He held her gaze. "I'm not handing you over on rumor. So you tell me first." The clock on the wall ticked. Outside, the ranch was waking hooves, Jonah's voice, the slam of a barn door. Life went on as if there wasn't a wanted notice on Cashin's table. Tamsin flattened the telegram, smoothing it with both palms like she could iron the words away. "If I tell you," she said finally, "what then? You hitch me to your horse and deliver me to Red Rock like a delivery of winter feed?" "If that's what I meant to do, I wouldn't have waited for daylight," Cashin said. "I won't decide who stands under my roof on a stranger's word. I'll decide after I know the truth." Her throat worked. Livia came through the doorway with a bowl of rising dough, eyes sharp enough to cut. "If you two are about to pull something foolish," she said, "you can at least do it on a full stomach. Eat." She set another biscuit on Tamsin's plate and gave Cashin a look that said she knew a wire when she saw one. "You talk better with your mouth busy. Both of you." "I'm not hungry," Tamsin muttered. "Doesn't matter," Livia said briskly. "He's been arguing with the Almighty and bad ideas since he was 18. I've never let him do it on an empty belly. You're no different." She squeezed Tamsin's shoulder and left. Tamsin stared at the biscuit. Then, with a quiet curse, she took 3 dutiful bites. When she set it down, her hands were steadier. "You want the truth," she said. "Fine." Her fingertip tapped the bottom of the telegram where Finch's name sat. "He wasn't Finch when I met him," she said. "Said his name was Eli. Came into the dress shop in Red Rock once a week to buy ribbon for a sister I'm pretty sure never existed." Her mouth twisted. "He made jokes about the bankers. I laughed. Not because he was that funny. Because I was tired of feeling small and scared, and he made the room feel bigger." Cashin stayed quiet. "He talked about leaving," she went on. "About places west where the sky is so big you can't see the edges of anything, even your own mistakes. Then one night he asked if I wanted to help him rob the men who dethroned my aunt out of her rooms twice in 6 months. You said yes," Cashin guessed. "I said no," she snapped. "For weeks. He kept saying he wasn't asking me to hold a gun. Just leave the back door unlatched on closing," he said. "They already stole it from folks like you. We're just stealing it back." Her hand curled. I told myself there was a difference between opening a door and walking through it. Her gaze drifted past him to the window. "Then my aunt came home with a handprint on her face," she said softly. "Landlord said he'd take his rent in flesh if he couldn't to get it in coin. She's the only person who ever stood between me and my father's temper. I couldn't stand to watch her beg." She swallowed. So I left the back door unlatched, she said. That night, the one before the bank wagon was due, I locked the front like I always did, walked out, and told myself if I didn't see anything happen, I hadn't really helped. Cashin's stomach clenched. Then the shots, he said. Glass, she whispered. I heard the first pane shatter before I got to the corner. Turned and saw Eli Finch standing in the counting room window with a gun and a smile like he'd been waiting his whole life for that feeling. 2 guards died before I took my next breath. Her knuckles went white. I ran. I didn't go back for my aunt. Didn't try to explain. Just ran until my lungs burned. Silence settled between them like dust. Finch let you go? Cashin asked. He didn't know I'd seen his face, she said. Not yet. A week later, outside a town west of Red Rock, one of his men grabbed me in an alley and told me their boss wanted his little dove back. Said I was part of the crew, now whether I liked it or not. Her fingers brushed the faint scar at her temple. He hit me with his gun when I said no. I broke a bottle over his head and ran again. If he'd been quicker, I'd be bones in a gully. She let her hand drop. So no, she said. I didn't ride with Finch. I didn't hold the gun. I opened the door and ran when I saw what I'd helped set loose. That is enough to hang a person in Red Rock if the right people need someone to blame. That's who you married last night. Cashin looked at her across the scarred wood. No, he said quietly. That's who Red Rock wrote down. Who I married is the woman who stood on a platform with rope burns on her wrists and told me to my face that she didn't to trust me, and still signed her name in front of Garvey, the judge, and half the town. She huffed. You married the only thing my father had left to sell, she said. Don't make it sound noble. He didn't argue that. You helped make a mess, he said instead. You owned it. You ran. Red Rock wants a neck for a story. Finch wants you quiet. That wire means one thing to me. Trouble's coming for you either way. She stared at him. So what? We pack a wagon and run faster? Every part of him that had once knelt in ash rebelled. I buried too many people because we couldn't outrun a fire, he said. I'm done running. We stand. Her eyes searched his face as if looking for proof he meant it. And if Marshall Crane doesn't care about the difference between a fool girl and a murderer? She asked. Then he'll have to care about the difference between a wanted name on paper and a man he just watched put irons on Finch, Cashin said. You tell him everything. Lyle and I stand there while you do. If Red Rock still wants to hang you after that, they'll have to come through Holt Land to try. Tamsin's fingers crumpled the telegram. You say that like it's simple, she murmured. It's not, he said. But it's the only thing I can live with. She let out a breath that sounded like it hurt. All right, she whispered. We stand. Marshall Crane rode in before noon with 2 men, a star on his chest and doubt in his eyes. From the shade of the porch, Tamsin watched them crest the rise by the Holt gate, 3 hard-used horses, 3 harder-looking riders. Lyle paced them, hat low, hand resting easy near his gun. Cashin met them in the yard, Jonah at his shoulder. Cashin Holt? The marshal called. Last I checked, Cashin answered. Crane swung down, dust sifting off his coat. Up close, he looked like a man carved out of old leather and stubbornness. He held out a folded sheet. Notice from Red Rock, he said. Says a girl named Tamsin Rowe helped Finch with the bank job. Says I'm to bring her in if I find her breathing. His gaze slid toward the porch. Sheriff says that might be you. Tamsin stepped down, rifle nowhere in sight, hands open at her sides. It's Tamsin Rowe, she said. They spell it wrong when they print wanted posters, too. Crane studied her, eyes missing nothing, the bruise at her mouth, the scar at her temple, the way she didn't flinch under his stare. You know why I'm here, he said. Because 2 guards died when I left the door, unlatched, she answered. And because Finch is too fast for your rope, Crane's mouth moved, almost a smile. That's part of it, he said. The other part is one of Finch's boys caught a bullet last week and started talking. Says there was a girl with them. Dark hair, scar. Says Finch called her his dove. So here we are. He glanced at Cashin. Sheriff tells me you married her last night. I did, Cashin said. Crane's brows lifted. Quick work, he said. You always bring home strays with wanted papers? Only when the alternative is watching Garvey sell them like livestock, Cashin replied. Tamsin felt heat burn under her skin. Crane considered that, then jerked his head toward the house. We talk inside, he said. At your table. No cuffs unless she makes me wish I had them. His gaze pinned Tamsin. You give me the whole story. You trim it to make yourself look clean, and I haul you back to Red Rock in front of me on a saddle. Fear flared in her chest. She lifted her chin anyway. Then you better pour strong coffee, she said. It's not a pretty story. By the time Tamsin finished talking, the coffee had gone cold. She sat at Cashin's kitchen table with her hands knotted together, voice raw from laying out every ugly detail Eli's visits. The broken landlord, the door left unlatched, the gunshots, Finch's grin, the bottle, the running. She told it the same way she had that morning, only now the words would go further. Crane listened, elbows on his knees, star catching the light in small, steady flashes. Lyle leaned against the wall, arms folded, eyes narrowed. Cashin sat near enough that she could feel his presence, far enough not to be mistaken for an answer. When she fell silent, the kitchen hummed with the tick of the clock and the distant sounds of the yard. So, Crane said, you opened the door. You didn't carry a gun. You didn't take a cut. No, she said. You ran, he went on. Didn't go back to your aunt. Didn't go to the law. I was afraid they'd hang me for being near the blast, she said. Looks like I wasn't wrong. She met his eyes. I'm not asking to be called innocent. I'm asking not to be hung for murders I didn't to commit just because Finch is hard to catch. Crane stared at her for a long, uncomfortable beat. Finch's man says you rode with him, he said. Then he's lying, or Finch paid him to be, she replied. I was hiding behind a coal cart 3 streets over. Crane let out a breath. I've seen a lot of guilty folks, he said. They usually spend more time pointing at everyone else than themselves. You, Mrs. Holt, got plenty of blame aimed your own way. Habit, she said dryly. He huffed a humorless sound. Red Rock still has your name on a poster, he said. But after what I heard, I figure you're more useful talking than swinging. Doesn't mean you're free. It means you're a witness who owes the truth. Finch won't like that. Good, Tamsin said. I'm tired of him liking anything that has to do with me. Crane stood. Word travels fast, he said. If his boys are anywhere near a telegraph line, Finch already knows I sent for you. He looked at Cashin. That means if he's coming soon. Cashin's jaw set. We'll be ready. Crane's gaze swept the room. You got how many hands on this place? 8, plus me and Jonah, Cashin said. Livia's better with a ladle than a gun, but she'll hit what she throws at. Good, Crane said. We use your fences and my badge and see if we can break this outlaw where he thinks he is strongest right in front of his pride. Lyle pushed off the wall. I'll talk to the boys, he said. Make sure they understand we aim to take Finch alive if we can. Doesn't mean we let him kill us to do it. Tamsin's stomach dipped. He'll come, she said quietly. He can't stand the idea of someone walking away from him, especially if he thinks they're talking. Crane nodded once. Then let's give him a welcome that sticks. The air over the Holt spread felt different by afternoon. Every sound came sharper. The clang of a gate, the creak of a saddle, Jonah's voice cutting across the yard as he positioned men. Rifles loaded. Keep your heads low, he barked. Cole, you and Ben take the wagon by the gate. Hank, water those horses now, not when lead's flying. Livia hauled the youngest stable. Boy and the cook toward the stone cellar beneath the house with a basket of bread and 2 jugs of water. If guns go off, you bar that door and don't open it until you hear Cashin or Lyle, she ordered. I don't care if the devil himself sweet-talks you through the keyhole. What about you? The boy asked. I'll be busy making sure the rest of this place still stands when it is over, she said. Someone has to scrub the blood later. On the porch, Tamsin checked the rifle Jonah had thrust into her hands. You can still go down in that cellar, Cashin said beside her. No shame in staying alive. You're not going, she answered, so I'm not either. Stubborn, he muttered. Pot, kettle, she shot back. Jonah's shout cut across the exchange. Riders! Cashin's gut went cold and hot at once. He strode to the edge of the yard and narrowed his eyes toward the Holt gate. Dust rose on the horizon in a thick plume, not the lazy drift of a single wagon, but the deliberate churn of hard-ridden horses. Count! Crane called from his position behind the stone trough. 8, Jonah yelled back. And more in the scrub, I'd bet. Tamsin's skin prickled. He likes an audience, she murmured. He'll show himself. Cashin glanced at her, then nodded toward the barn. Loft window, he said. You and 2 of the best shots. You'll see him coming from there. Up in the loft, the air smelled of hay and old leather. Well, now, he called. Marshal Crane, Sheriff, Rich Holt, all lined up like ducks on a pond. His gaze swept the yard. Only thing missing is my dove. Cashin's fingers tightened on his rifle. You rode a long way for disappointment, he said. She doesn't belong to you. Finch's eyes flicked toward the house. That so? He drawled. Word in town says you signed papers. Shiny ring, rich name. You think ink changes what a person is? He raised his voice. Tamsin, you hiding behind this man's boots? Enough. Tamsin stepped into the loft opening. I'm right here, she shouted. Finch's head snapped up. There she is, he said. You picked yourself a tall wall to cower behind of. His smile thinned. Marshall get what he wanted? He got the truth, she called. Name, face, every lie you told me. Finch's jaw flexed. That wasn't your story to tell, he said softly. It stopped being yours the minute you shot those guards in Red Rock, she replied. You wanted quiet. You shouldn't have made so much noise. The men around Finch shifted uneasily. Crane's voice cut through. Elias Finch. By authority of Red Rock and this territory, I'm placing you under arrest for robbery and murder. You and your boys drop your guns and step away from your horses. Finch laughed. You brought a badge to a gunfight, Marshal, he said. Cute. He tipped his hat with 2 fingers. I got men in that brush and in your town. You shoot me. Someone visits your telegraph and your banker. His gaze went back to Tamsin. Or you could make it easy. Send my girl down. She comes with me, we ride away, and Holt gets to keep his fences. Tamsin's skin crawled. Old instincts rose run, go, don't let anyone bleed for you. She looked down into the yard, at Cashin standing solid as a post, at Jonah, at Lyle, at the hands she'd watched work all morning. She thought of the dawn, of Cashin saying we stand. No, she said. The word left her mouth like a shot. I'm not your girl, she called. Not now. Not ever. Finch's smile curdled. You sure? he asked quietly. "You opened that door. A lot of men bled because you liked the way I talked. You think that washes off just because this rancher gave you his name?" "No," she said. "It doesn't. But today you bleed for what you chose, not me." Finch's hand twitched. "Boys," he said. Gunfire erupted from both sides of the road. The first volley chewed splinters from the fence posts and kicked up dirt in the yard. Cashin dropped behind the trough as bullets shrieked past his ear. Crane cursed and returned fire, his deputy following suit. Lyle's gun barked from cover at the wagon. In the loft, Tamsin flinched at the first crack, then forced herself back to the window. She didn't aim at Finch first. She aimed at the man she saw in the mesquite to the left, lining up a rifle on Cashin's back. Her breath slowed. She squeezed the trigger. The rifle slammed into her shoulder. Below, the outlaw jerked and went down. "Nice shot." Jonah shouted beside her. "Right flank, 2 more." She shifted, fired, missed, fired again. The world narrowed to the sights, the shapes, the way people moved. Someone below cried out. Tamsin's heart lurched until she saw Sam hauled toward cover, clutching a bleeding thigh but cursing loud enough to count as alive. Finch wheeled his horse sideways, shooting toward the barn. Grin Wolf bright. "Come on, Dove," he called. "Show me that spine you've been waving around." She wanted to shoot him. God, she wanted to. Instead, she aimed at the man near him, who was taking careful aim at Crane. Another shot. Another body down. Pain burned along her upper arm, hot and stunning. She gasped and glanced down. A bullet had furrowed through her sleeve, kissing skin deep enough to bleed without tearing muscle. "You hit?" Jonah yelled. "Grazed," she shouted back, teeth gritted. Rage pushed fear aside. She swung the rifle back to Finch. He sat his horse cocky as ever, hat low. She couldn't see his eyes, but she could feel them trying to find her in the glare. "For the guards," she whispered. "For my aunt. For me." She lined up on the strip of shirt between his vest and his hat brim, pulled the trigger. His hat flew as the bullet tore through its brim and burned across his shoulder. He screamed, shock cracking his charm. "You little," he spat, grabbing for his gun. Cashin saw that motion. Without thinking, he broke from cover. "Cashin!" Lyle barked. Cashin ran anyway, boots pounding the dirt, putting himself in the line between Finch's gun and his men. The world shrank to the dark circle of Finch's barrel. Finch fired. At the same instant, Tamsin did too. The outlaw's shot went wild, kicking up dirt at Cashin's boots. Her bullet slammed into Finch's side. He tumbled out of the saddle, hitting the ground hard and rolling to a stop in a cloud of dust. For a heartbeat, the yard was stunned. Then Crane's voice cut through. "Stand down," he roared. "Drop your guns." Outlaws hesitated. One reached for his holster. Lyle put a bullet in the dirt, an inch from his hand. "You heard him," the sheriff said. "Next one goes in you." Guns clattered to the ground. "On your knees," Crane snapped. They obeyed. Only Finch stayed down, one hand clamped over his bleeding side, the other clawing for his fallen revolver. Cashin stepped on it and kicked it away. "You're done," he said. Finch glared up at him, sweat and dirt streaking his face. "You going to shoot me now and sleep like a hero?" he snarled. "No," Cashin said. "I'm going to watch you stand in front of the men who wrote that notice and listen while she tells them exactly who you are." Crane approached, gun steady. "Elias Finch," he said. "By authority of Red Rock and this territory, you're under arrest for robbery and murder." He nodded to his deputy. "Irons, make them tight." Steel bit Finch's wrists. His gaze climbed past Crane, past Cashin, searching. It found Tamsin. She'd come down from the loft, face pale, sleeve bloody, rifle still in her good hand. You think this changes anything? He rasped. You think they'll forget you opened that door? No, she said. They'll remember that I did. And they'll also remember who shot you off your horse when you came back to finish what you started. Her jaw set. I ran once. I'm done. Hatred burned in his eyes. You could have been queen of something, he hissed. You chose to be a rancher's charity. I chose to be a woman who can look at herself in daylight, she said. You wouldn't understand. Crane's mouth twitched. She'll make a better witness than you ever were a mastermind, he told Finch. Mount him up. We've wasted enough of Holt's day. By sunset, dust and blood had dried into the Holt yard. One hand nursed a stitched leg. Another had a bandaged arm. The barn and trough sported fresh bullet scars. A tarp near the gate covered a dead outlaw, waiting for the ground. But the house was standing. Everyone under its roof was breathing. Crane had Finch and 3 surviving men tied to their saddles, ready for the long ride back to Red Rock. Lyle checked the last knot and stepped away. You sure you don't want extra guns on that trail? Cashin asked the marshal. I brought enough to keep him from getting clever, Crane said. Besides, I need you here when Red Rock sends for a statement. He tugged a paper from his coat, the same notice he'd shown that morning. He scratched a line through wanted and wrote witness in a firm hand beside it. Not official, but it'll do until I get to a judge, he said, passing it to Cashin. Red Rock might grumble, but Finch bleeding on their floor will talk louder than their gossip. Cashin folded the paper carefully. Appreciate it, he said. Crane swung into the saddle. You got yourself a messy woman with more sand than most men I've locked up, he said. Keep her pointing that spine at the right people. His gaze flicked to Tamsin, who sat on the porch steps with Livia fussing over her arm. Red Rock'll be telling this story for a long time. Make sure you keep the facts ready when they get it wrong. I intend to, Cashin said. As the riders disappeared into the fading light, the tension that had gripped the ranch began to ease. Jonah leaned against a fence post, letting out a thin whistle. Remind me not to complain that it's this boring around here for at least a week, he said. Cashin clapped his shoulder. Tomorrow you'll be yelling about the same fences, he said. Probably, Jonah agreed. Go sit with her before Livia decides you've lost your mind and tries to trade you for a broom. Tamsin's arm throbbed under fresh bandages. Hold still, Livia scolded, tying off the last knot. You swing a rifle at a grown man. You take the salve without wriggling. That's the rule. He was halfway up the ladder, Tamsin muttered. I wasn't going to wait for him to introduce himself. Livia sniffed, but pride warmed her eyes. You did what needed doing, she said. Just don't make it a habit every week. I only got so much linen. She patted Tamsin's shoulder and rose. I'll fetch something hot. When she stepped aside, Cashin took her place on the step below. You all right? He asked. Arms on fire, heads loud, stomachs confused, Tamsin said. So, better than I expected. He held out the folded notice. Marshall left you this, he said. She took it, uncertain. When she unfolded it and saw the heavy line through wanted and the untidy witness, her breath caught. Her fingers tightened until the paper rustled. Not a pardon, she said. No, he agreed. But not a rope either. She stared at the word. I thought I'd die with that hanging over me, she admitted. Even if they never caught me. Just waiting. Now if you die, he said, it'll be because Jonah talked you into riding a half-broke horse, or Livia fed you too much pie. A laugh escaped her, sharp and shaky. You joke, she said, but Red Rock will still talk. They'll still spit my name in some saloons. Let them, Cashin said. They've been spitting mine for years. Rich Holt, Vulture Holt, Haunted Holt. Not one of them ever stopped me from mending fence or paying wages. He touched the edge of the paper. The more days you spend here choosing different, the less that poster means. She looked at him, really looked the dust in his hair, the tired cut of his mouth, the concern he didn't bother to hide. When you slammed that coin pouch on Garvey's block, she said slowly, I thought you were buying yourself a softer pillow. A conscience tax. A rich man's way to say he tried. Her gaze dropped to the paper. But you stood in front of Finch today. You didn't flinch when he pointed that gun at you. I did flinch, Cashin said. I just flinched forward. She snorted. Idiot, she murmured. Likely, he agreed. Silence stretched, humming with words unsaid. You keep talking like I'm staying, she said at last. You keep acting like you are, he replied. If I left now, she said, I'd have my name on less paper and more miles between me and Red Rock. I know how to run. I've had practice. Her fingers pressed the telegram. But when I think about walking away from this porch, I feel... She searched for the word. Wrong. Hollow? Hope flickered in his chest, dangerous and bright. Tamsin, he said. She lifted her gaze. I don't know how to be a wife, she said before he could speak. I don't know how to sleep in a bed that I sint have packed in my head. I don't know how to live in a house with ghosts that aren't mine. A breath shuddered out of her. But I know this. Today, when Finch rode in, I didn't run. I stayed because I didn't want you standing there alone. And tonight, when I think about tomorrow, I don't picture a road. I picture this kitchen, these steps, you. He swallowed hard. Are you saying what I think you're saying? He asked. She let out a shaky laugh. I'm saying I choose this stupid, stubborn piece of land, she said. And the stupid, stubborn man tied to it? Her eyes glistened. If you'll have me as I am. Not as some cleaned-up story. For a moment, words deserted him. When he found them, they came rough. I don't want a clean slate, he said. I want you. The woman who swung a rifle in my barn and shot Finch out of the saddle. The woman who told me the worst thing she'd done, and then looked me in the eye while I decided what to do with it. His thumb brushed her knuckles. I want to build something with you that isn't about running or owing. Her smile trembled. Then what now? She whispered. Now we stop pretending you're a guest, he said. There's a room across from mine that hasn't seen life in years. It can be yours while we figure out what sharing looks like. Livia will rearrange the whole house in her head. Jonah will make terrible jokes. The hands will stare. We'll keep showing up anyway. A soft laugh escaped her. Livia already said the ghosts are bored, she murmured. Might as well give them something new to haunt. He raised a hand, slow, and touched her jaw, callous thumb brushing the edge of the fading bruise. May I? He asked. Her breath hitched. Is that a husband's right? No, he said. A man's question. Her eyes softened. Then yes, she whispered. He leaned in. The kiss was careful. No desperation in it now. Just two people testing how they fit. She tasted of coffee and courage. Her good hand curled in his shirt. His hand settled at the back of her neck, steady and sure. When they parted, she rested her forehead against his. Terrified, she murmured. Me too, he said. But less than I was when you were up in that loft with bullets flying. Her mouth quirked. Get used to it, she said. I'm not exactly a quiet life. Good, he replied. Quiet was killing me. That night, the Holt house didn't feel like a mausoleum built for ghosts. It felt like a place that had survived a storm and was still standing. The bunkhouse hummed with off-key singing and low laughter. Someone passed a bottle. Someone else retold the day's fight, already bigger than it had been. Lyle had ridden back toward town with Crane, promising to send word as soon as Finch stood in front of a judge. In the kitchen, Livia banged pots and muttered about bullet holes and men with no sense. Tamsin stood at the window of the room Livia had given her, looking out over the yard. The barn's new scars were just dark smudges in the dusk. The trough sat solid and chipped. The porch where she and Cashin had kissed was a pale strip in the fading light. A knock sounded on the doorframe. "Tamsin," Cashin's voice. "Come in," she said. He leaned in the doorway, hat in his hands. "You settling?" he asked. "Not sure I remember how," she said, "but I'm trying." He nodded. "Crane left something else," he said, reaching into his vest. He handed her the telegram. The same words stared up at her. "Seek woman Tansign Row we. Possible accomplice. Apprehend if seen." But down at the bottom, in Crane's rough hand, new words had been added. Revised. Hold as witness. Nitrogen monoxide. Further action without testimony. "It's not clean," Cashin said. "But it's different." She folded it carefully. "I'll keep it," she said, "to remember what I almost let own me." And what didn't. She set it on the small table by the bed. "Maybe someday we'll have other papers next to it. Deeds, harvest tallies. Something that says Rowe and Holt on the same line without anyone choking." His lips curved. "I'd like that," he said. She turned back to the window. Stars were beginning to prick through the deepening blue. "Do you ever think you'll stop waiting for the next fire?" she asked quietly. He stood beside her, looking out at his land. "Maybe not entirely," he said, "but I think I'll stop expecting to face it alone." Her hand slid into his. "I don't plan on going anywhere," she said. "Not unless I'm riding at your side." "Good," he replied, "because I'm not much use in town without someone to tell me when I'm being an idiot." "That's a full-time job," she said. He laughed, low and warm. Outside, somewhere beyond Dry Creek, a train whistle carried on the wind. Other towns. Other stories. Other people running and standing and choosing. For the first time in years, Tamsin didn't feel like she belonged on that train. She belonged here, on this patch of stubborn earth, with this man who'd chosen her when she was at her worst and kept choosing her when it cost him. "Whatever comes next," she said, watching the horizon, "we'll meet it." Cashin squeezed her fingers. "Together," he said. "Together," she echoed. The night settled around the Holt house, not empty, but full of breath and possibility. Trouble would come again. It always did out here. But when it did, it would find a rich rancher and the bride nobody wanted standing side by side, having chosen each other on purpose. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.